All right, you're all set.
Lovely. Hello all. How are we today then?
Hello.
Hello, good to see you.
Oh, cool.
Hey, everyone.
So it's a bit of a quieter meeting this week than last week, but hopefully it'll be just as interesting. So in terms of an agenda, we've got an update on the PRs for the working group stubs, continuing the discussion on the build pack and deployments working groups, and then any other business. So I guess we'll start with the update on the PRs for the working group stubs. So I've seen a fair bit of activity on there. So,
I have failed to really complete the two that I've been assigned, and part of that was I have the week off this week, so I did a bunch of work, like packed everything in last week. But I have a good feeling about next week. I don't have a ton on my plate, and I'll have a lot of time. I really appreciated Ruben's help on the Bosch PR group. He's got that technology that helps us comb through the commits, which is great. I mean, it's a small script, but it's really useful. So I think we could apply that on other working groups to find likely approver candidates for groups.
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense to do that. Do we think that's worth setting up as an actual task just to go through and do?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I think some groups, people just know a lot of approvers already on, but there's a risk that we'll like forget somebody who's like clearly a contributor. And, you know, on the other hand, if we forget somebody, we can add them later, right? This is not a waterfall process where we have to get 100% of the approvers added correctly the first time.
That's true. That's definitely true. I just wonder if it's worth doing kind of as an initial thing so that we've just got the data there.
Sure, it doesn't seem incredibly hard, though. It does make you decide which code bases exactly belong in the working group, which is useful, but it's a bit top down, as in you haven't sort of empowered the working group leads to go off and fully define the working group. Instead, you said, we already decided exactly 100% of the code bases that belong. We ran the script analysis. Here's all the people.
That's an extremely good point.
For the application interfaces working group, I received a little bit of input by Seth, but yeah, there's not so much discussion, I would say. The only discussion we had was on the build packs working group, and maybe that can also have an input for the interfaces working groups that we could discuss today, especially with a cutting, because that was when I wrote down the content proposal, so a charter and some goals. You see clearly with the initial idea to put in everything from the API to the autoscaler, that I'm not sure whether it fits. And I think, I forgot the name, but from the build pack, somebody proposed a slightly different cut, which depending on the outcome from the build packs discussion may make sense. So it means more in the direction of the former extension PMC that we had. But let's see where it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had pinged some people on the app runtime platform group, and there'd been some tangential discussion about moving the HA proxy release into the Cloud Foundry org, but I think that's pretty independent of any of the organizational discussions that we're having. And otherwise, I didn't get a lot of response yet from the people that we pulled in. That said, I mean, a lot of those folks are at VMware, and they too may have been focusing on other things before this kind of downtime week that we're having right now. So, and it seems a little inappropriate to ping them this week, so I'll try and hit them up early next week too. I'm supposed to try not bothering them.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense if it's a downtime week. So that's all good there.
But I too might try making a pass at a charter draft for that, which would be good to solicit their more specific feedback on. And I think we maybe have a few other folks who are standing out as potential technical or execution leads. I think like Amelia's in that group, and she's been very interested in leading at least networking, which is a lot of the activity that's in that group anyway.
Amelia's a good example of Amelia is somebody who has vendor support from VMware to kind of step up and lead that working group, is interested in leading the broader app runtime platform, whatever it's called, back in a working group. I wonder what it takes. Like, I feel like we need to make progress on a couple of them and like find leads. I think the criteria that I've been using in my mind is really has vendor support means you're willing to do it as like a half-time job. Like you recognize that it's going to be about a half-time job. You're not doing it in your spare time. Like the company that's paying you is willing to pay you to do that for some significant percentage of your time. I've been telling people it's like 20 to 50% of your time. And in the beginning, it's definitely going to be front loaded, right? And maybe you can get it, if it's a smaller group, you could definitely get it down to a 20% job. It depends on how many other leads there are, right? And how much other support there is, but it could become quite a large job. That being said, like Eric and I feel really good about Amelia putting her forward as a candidate for the lead. And then I'm like, well, I would just like to get this done so that she can help bootstrap the working group. And then I'm like, well, that's not fair. Like, how do we solicit, sorry, that's an egg. How do we solicit like other interests, right? I can't be like, well, Amelia's the person for sure. Let's just do it. Because that's not fair. So I'm open to what other people think is a reasonable process to decide if there's other candidates for that tech lead role in that working group.
I mean, I'm happy to defer at this point to those that have been within the ecosystem for an awful lot longer. But I think the idea of actually getting one of them bootstrapped and up and running is a really good way. So there's a worked example of which to base everything else on.
We also feel very good about Ruben, which isn't surprising because he's like really interested in the area. He's been talking to Eric and I about leadership in the open source for quite a while. And like, so I'm like, there's two people that I feel really good about both doing the job and supporting during the job as in giving the time to do the job too. And I've gotten buy-in from VMware leadership to like make sure that they know that there's going to be time spent and so on, right? All the stuff you need to do to put vendor support fully behind a candidate. So like, yeah, I mean, we could we could start any number of these, not exactly at the same time. I think maybe what we're looking for before we do that is like official ratification that these should be the groups, right? Because we don't want to like put somebody into a leadership position for a group to bootstrap it and then realize that we actually don't even like the groups the way they are, right? We do need to decide that these groups are the right groups. And then I think we could bootstrap a couple of them with some number of leads, but I do want to give some period to see if there's other candidates who might also be good. Like it seems totally unfair to grab the people that I like and see like, well, let's just start with them.
I think the foundational infrastructure working group is another one where, you know, even looking at the projects that we're putting in there, like, you know, Stefan, not to put you from SAP on the spot, but there has been a lot of that SAP activity around Bosch and UAA.
Yep.
And so that might be another case where, you know, I think from the VMware side, we've had in mind that Ruben would be a good candidate to help lead that group. But if there's other candidates from SAP, it'd be great to get kind of a short list there. And then maybe that's the set of leads that would make sense to start up that working group.
Yeah, I think as well, that's a fairly non-controversial one in terms of what it's going to contain, which is the other thing.
You say that, but it's a bit of a junk drawer of things that are not exactly Cloud Foundry, right? And so like they may come out of the woodwork later, but that's okay. It would be great to have a lead or two in place who are like, no, that does belong or doesn't belong inside of this group, so that we don't dump larger and larger number of properties in there. Like HA proxy release. I was like, where's HA proxy release go? Well, it's like a standalone Bosch release, just does a thing. I don't know. Foundational infrastructure.
What I can do, I can reach out to, let's say, canonical candidates from the Bosch team, so Felix, for instance, or from the UAA, Martijn, and ask them whether they want to step up and apply for that, and then they could comment on the PR or reach out to the TOC channel and ask them. But what I cannot do is I cannot push them there. I can ask only. I'm not in a position to put anybody somewhere.
Yeah, I think similarly, I don't have that direct organizational influence over folks, and David kind of barely does. So we can similarly advocate for participation. Yeah.
Okay. Might take a little bit of time because at the moment is vacation high season in Germany. So
yeah,
we will see, but I can reach out for sure.
sure. Thanks, Stefan.
Excellent. Yes, thank you very much for that one. Okay, so I think we've got sort of a plan forward there then of the bootstrapping a couple and getting those underway, which kind of leads us on to the slightly more interesting one of build packs and runtime interfaces and quite how that fits together. So we've had a fair bit of discussion on the PR for that working group. What do we think?
I had also some background discussions with Jan about that. Also controversial ones. I mean, there are different forces. And the one thing that I find important is that somehow we manage, let's say, a smooth way forward with build packs also for existing customers. That means sort of a migration path, whatever it looks like. So put a focus on the involvement. From my experience, usually then it makes sense to put the owners of the old and the new build packs close together. Let's say it like this. On the other hand, I understood also that there is a fear that if Paketo gets too close to into Cloud Foundry, then there's a risk that it doesn't really take off in a broader community. And if we would, let's say, think about Paketo would now be managed in CNCF, then how would we deal with build packs in such a situation? Maybe that can lead then to a good cut. Yeah, so I definitely won't veto against any of the proposals. It's just I want to have these concerns somehow addressed, that we are all sure that build packs get migrated. I found the proposal interesting on the build packs working group. If we, let's say, decide that build packs are considered as one part of the interface, customer-facing interface, which it is actually, and we put it into the interfaces working group, then maybe to consider the cut of this interfaces working group again, because then it becomes really huge with so many different things that it's hard to write a charter for that one. Maybe that's a way out of this discussion.
I wonder if, I mean, at some point we need to vote and get decision made, right, about how to proceed with build packs. I feel like what this pull request actually needs, I mean, I was just reading through it for a minute. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of content. I'm not going to read this right now. What we need is a consolidated list of options that we think actually makes sense, like 2 or 3 options, and then to actually see if we can get like a vote and a alignment around one of them, because not everyone's going to be happy, period, no matter which direction we go.
That's the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think last time we'd even talked about maybe we should have a counter proposal charter that's just for Paketo as a working group, and we'd have that to reason over. I mean, as a counter, I might need to delineate where the CF build packs responsibilities would land, and I mean, I think we've said that's where we see interfaces in app runtime making the most sense. But we could at least list like those 2 as potential options to consider, and see if there's any others that might make sense, even just as things that seem absurd, or could at least be setting the boundaries about like, okay, what would make sense? Like, what if we put build packs in, app runtime deployments, or platform, or I guess maybe a third possibility is putting it in its own working group, completely independent. But I think we've had concerns about that too.
Where does the cfLinuxFS fall?
I
think that falls within that CF build packs realm as well.
Agreed. I just didn't see it in the list.
Yeah,
but I can like.
I think it's probably, that might be good. Dan Makusa had provided a big list of things that were build pack related, but I don't recall whether it's.
It wasn't, right. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. Is that a runtime platform? Like, low-level Diego thing? Not really. I think it does belong with build packs, and it further increases the scope of the build packs area.
So I think y'all are heading down a good path for how to make a decision. I just want to add maybe a philosophical view that you might find valuable in when you do make the choice. The most effective structure of a working group is always going to be when the people involved are willing to like own the thing, and they have interest in owning the thing, whether that interest is through employment or personal interest or whatever. So the tension between that philosophy and use of inverse Conway's law, I think is what you're running into here, right? Because I would assume you all, and Stefan in particular, noted, having a migration path, seeing, the core Cloud Foundry project adopt Paketo build packs is an outcome you're looking for. But at the same time, I would say maybe take a look at who's willing to do the work. And if those are independent groups, even if they overlap, that might guide you a little bit better. As long as you can get someone thinking about making that technical outcome occur.
If I'm reading you correctly, Chip, I mean, I think the statement was made previously that almost all the same people work on both, but that may change, or that maybe the trend is that is changing. So it's a bit tricky because you have to think about, do you want to make decisions based on current state or predicted future state?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the Paketo project has contributors from a broader ecosystem already. And so you're not actually talking about a future state. What you're talking about is recognizing the current state and trajectory of Paketo itself. And I think that then independently, you could say, what's the current state of contribution to the classic Cloud Foundry build packs? And that is clearly, surely a Cloud Foundry oriented group of people. Whether you're talking about the committer base or whether you're talking about all contributors, everyone is using Cloud Foundry, and that's why they're editing those build packs.
Yeah, so like putting it in interfaces might be more aligned with the people that would be interested in similar things.
I think so. And then I think also there would then be an impetus for that group to want to deprecate the classic build packs and get over to Paketo.
Right. If they're like, oh, there's all this extra stuff we have to own. If we could consolidate, I mean, in some sense that could apply to either working group, but I mean, one thing that I felt like we can also use to help determine what the right structure is like what we want priorities to be. And I guess my concern with consolidating all of the build pack work into a single working group is that they might end up favoring technological convergence over preserving behavior, which I think we've already recognized has been a problem with things like cfRicates when they tried to switch over, like by necessity, to the Paketo build packs last year because we didn't have V2 build packs that would run as part of a cloud native build pack system. And so, even there, like one of the big pieces of friction we've had there is then incompatibilities for existing CF apps. And I could see if the app runtime interfaces group is owning that part of the interface to the system and is prioritizing that kinds of backwards compatibility with existing interfaces on top of Bosch infrastructure, then I mean that might mean we're going to converge slower, but we'll have more continuity of that experience because of those priorities. But anyway, I think it sounds like a good next step to go to the next level of detail in terms of writing out 2 or 3 alternatives and getting them fleshed out, and then we can compare them side by side and make a decision based on that.
Great.
What do you actually think about, let's assume one of these proposals would be to put the CF build packs into the interfaces group, that we then in turn split up the interfaces group and take out things like autoscaler and the more far away functionality. Because otherwise I'm afraid that the interfaces working group gets really huge. Just from reading through it. So as I said, I had a problem to write a charter. And if you read the charter that I've written down, it addresses the API part closer than the other parts. But that, yeah, well, you have a history, and that's why it's written like this. So I personally had trouble to write something into it for autoscaler and multi-apps and even all the different language bindings. They are closer to the API, but still the question is, how many do you put inside? Does it make sense, or is it just the API and CLI and build packs? I don't know, but it would mean, wrapping up the cut of working groups again and add one or two more.
Right.
Not quite runtime interfaces.
Yeah, I think there's a good case to remove some of those things from that group. Stefan, I completely agree. What I worry about is that they're not that commonly used, and it's starting to look like extensions, PM, like it's starting to look like a group of things that are not that interesting to anybody. And we could create such a group. If you put it in the interfaces group, you might be trying to trend towards shutting down some of those projects, or over time, so that to decrease the load on that. So I'm not sure what's a better outcome there, but I don't think there's an outcome where it goes in some of those lesser used properties go into the interfaces group and get a lot of attention and future thought, right? They're going to get kind of forgotten there and either left to be in whatever state they're in, or purposely shut down potentially. So that might be okay, right? If that's the outcome we want for a couple of those things, then putting them in that working group might result in them getting shut down. Or we build an extensions group or something, right? I don't know what you call it, but it's a set of things that are just living there and have maybe their own leadership and contributors, and are mostly ignored by the foundation and the TOC.
Yeah, there are some projects which definitely have good contribution, like the Java language binding for the API, also the Python language binding. There is activity in it. Does it have to be necessarily? It would fit in the interfaces group, I would say, yes. Is it necessarily there? Don't know. Why is then the Go language binding not inside, or you call it whatever funny programming language, you can end up there. And then there are a number of projects which are, well, if I look at them, they are open source indeed, but one contributor and one consumer, and I know both of them. To say it.
There's a play for like a languages-based working group, right? That does build packs and language bindings. It's like the things where you have to actually understand the different programming languages and their usage for applications.
I mean, that's not horrible. If you think back to the 2015 structure, there was the Java bindings and the Java build pack clustered together.
What do we have?
Yeah, I guess if we did split the interfaces working group into things that seem more like core, like certainly the core APIs and system interfaces, and then maybe distinguished clients. I mean, I think it might even have been Ryan Moran who suggested some initial cut of like build packs and CAPI and the CLI. seems like the Java client is maybe the next most closest in terms of core functionality. Like you could kind of see it as a peer to the CLI. And then it seems like pretty much everything else is, I guess there does seem like kind of a distinction between those things that are either providing the APIs to the system itself or just exposing them in a fairly direct way as clients versus things like notifications and app autoscaler that are really providing new functionality that's integrating with those APIs. Because there's not a core autoscaler functionality in the system itself. It's just this is an additional extension that's providing that capability by manipulating those APIs.
Yes, the same is true for multi-apps.
Yeah.
Not sure about Stratos. You could argue if the
oh,
CLI
yeah.
is inside where to put Stratos, but if you would ask me, but yeah, a personal opinion, it's more far away than the CLI, also from
Right.
the way how development happened in the past. If we talk now again, who would contribute? I mean, API copy team and the CLI team, they work really close together, even in this acceleration project. Stratos was always more far away, but
it also feels like a very different skill set as well.
oh yeah,
CLI development versus web interface development is a little bit apart.
I mean, a final option would be to leave those more far away projects out for now and let them apply for a working group. That's also an option.
Well, actually, thinking of those other forcing functions, I mean, one thing that was occurring to me is having them all in a larger working group could be a process to actually start including that functionality in the core interfaces. Like if that's all in one group, if we said, hey, it turns out like app auto scaling is useful, or the multi-apps description is useful. Now there's more cohesion around having a pathway to actually incorporate some of those things into the core system as official interfaces instead of just as extension ones. I don't know if that's a good, if that's reasonable for any of those existing capabilities as they're currently formulated or given what the user base is. But I mean, that is, if we're talking about those kinds of forcing functions on trajectories for the system, that is maybe one other thing to consider.
I think for some of the things, it definitely does make sense. Autoscaler being one where it makes an awful lot of sense to have that as a core functionality. Some of the others, possibly they're a little bit further away from that, but kind of sitting within that. Yeah, I can see both sides of that argument there.
Yeah.
Bear with me a sec. Sorry, cat attack. Yeah, so I can definitely see both sides of that argument. And yeah, it really is kind of, I don't think there's any one that's got a huge pro or a huge con.
Yeah, my start of rethinking is if we now decide to add build packs, I mean, it's a long list of projects to this one, then who's going to do this workgroup lead here with this zoo of projects?
Well, I mean, I think one thing that we've also said is even if there is that set of leads for the working group that has kind of that ultimate responsibility for the contents of the working group, I think in practice, especially for these larger ones, they're going to need to delegate to other people within the group. And so if we end up with larger groups with a comparatively larger set of contributors for the projects, because we're pulling in the people that are actually working on the things that are getting consolidated, versus splitting them up more finely, but still seeing the same people focusing on them. Then, I mean, I think that can mitigate some of our concerns around like, well, who's going to do all this stuff? Well, I mean, it's the same people that'd be doing it in the other organizational structure. And it might just mean a little more overhead for the leads in that group because they have to end up delegating to those people a little bit more. Or having a broader set of delegates to invoke if they're like, oh, you know, I don't have the ultimate expertise on multi-apps or something like that, but these folks that actually work on it know what's going on. Well, maybe those are two sub-variations of, okay, if we think Pacato stands alone as a working group, then build packs goes somewhere. And if it goes into app interfaces, do we keep it as one big working group, or do we try and cut it up into two working groups with kind of the inner planets and the outer planets? And we decided there's an asteroid belt in the middle somewhere. The debris of all the other failed projects.
Okay, well, yeah, it sounds like a sensible one to write up and see how that plays out amongst the community, really. Anybody fancy giving that a shot? Okay, I'll give it a shot then.
So do we have agreements that we add the build packs to the interfaces working group? Then I could do that. That means we shut down the existing build packs working group proposal?
Or do we just modify it?
Come Pacato one, yeah. I modify it so that all that context is in the PR comments. I like adding it to interfaces. I'm ready to approve that structure, or like at least make that the default structure going forward. And then I was doing something for my kids for a second. Then the proposal is we maybe bring the larger working group to existence, and then it decides whether it's too big is sort of one option, or we self-decide in advance that it's too big and split it, or we just hope that it's not too big and approve it, right? Something like that.
Well, it's not set in stone, so why not approve it in its larger state with, you know, explicitly saying if it is too large, then we can look at splitting it, or there's the option to kill things off and bring them in as core as appropriate to reduce scope that way.
Yeah, I heard y'all talking about like the idea that the properties are not in a working group at all, which is interesting, but they're still subject to foundation. Like you don't get out of it, right? It's like, haha, they'll be not in a working group, but then we won't have to apply foundation governance to it, which is not true. Because then I guess we're the working group for that, right? Like,
yeah, I think we've decided that if there's a technical asset, then it needs to be under some level of governance, or we shut it down. But if that seems rude to do to things that are actually active, so they should be in a working group somewhere. I like the idea of seeing what it looks like to include build packs, and then getting feedback from the people who'd be involved in the working group to see if it seems too large. That it does seem like we would want to get feedback, not just from the people that we think might be the leads, but also the people that they would be co-leading with, even in kind of a delegation scenario. Okay, just in terms of keeping track of what we're signing up for over the next week or so, I'm just looking over the notes that I was taking in the doc. Let's see. So Stefan, you said you'd be willing to take another crack at revising the existing interfaces charter to include build packs?
I could add them, and I could add the comments that we are thinking about, yeah, or asking for feedback on whether the work group is too big, or and it should be split with a proposal for a split, maybe something like that.
Got it. Okay.
That's something I could do. I have to say that I'm only available this week. From next week, I'm in vacation, so I won't participate in the next round, and somebody has then to take over.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Well, yeah. If however far you could get on that until you head out for vacation, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I would take the project list from the existing build pack working group and move it over and add 1 or 2 cents. I think I should be able to add the build packs this week. That should be realistic.
And I was going to be drafting the promotion of extensions into core components to reduce the scope of that group.
And then I think I said I would take a crack at drafting a charter for the app runtime platform group. Yeah. And then
And I'm still on the hook.
Yeah.
For the other 2.
Okay.
So Paketo would then remain in the Paketo projects would remain in the build packs working group, and I would take over only the let's say traditional build packs and related.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Okay.
Yeah, do you want to put me down as well for reworking the build packs working group stub into the Paketo working group stub?
Great. Okay. I think I got all that down in the doc.
Yep, looks good for me. Have we got any other business? If not, I propose we gain 19 minutes back.
Sounds good. So I'll get to work.
Great.
I'll finish work.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, Stefan, have a good few weeks of vacation.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in a few weeks.
Sure.
All right.
See you later.
Have a good one,
Bye,
all.
everyone.
See
See you
you.
later.
Bye.